Welcome out to Pick Six. Follow us on social if you're not already at Pick Six Pod across all social media platforms. All right, we've talked about quarterbacks already in the league. Let's talk about some prospects. Bryce Young canceling draft visits. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but what is your thought? Good idea, or should he continue to go through the process?
It just kind of leads me to think that he's already in conversations with the Carolina Panthers as a number one overall pick. That's the only reason for this, because obviously when it gets out publicly, it's not a great look. But if you're already in negotiations and they're going to select you number one overall, this is the step that you take, at least as a player. There's no point in distracting yourself or traveling and putting yourself through that when that's not even a possibility. And so he's the heavy favorite as of now. Those odds have dramatically flipped. We know that. It also reminds me of when Joe Burrow was coming out and he was viewed as number one overall, and the Bengals were basically giving him their playbook along the course of the way because they knew they were going to take him. So very similar scenario here. That's essentially what's happened. And this has always been the case. I remember in my draft, the first contract that was thrown out was offered to Jamarcus Russell, obviously, who ended up going number one overall in my draft class, Calvin Johnson, myself, and someone else. And it was a very vague kind of boilerplate, really like not much going on in the contract. And my agent, Tom Conn, at the time was like, yeah, we're not even going to really entertain this because it's too vague. There's nothing really to take from that. Obviously, Jamarcus ended up being the selection at that spot, but there was still, I guess, maybe some doubt in their minds as to what direction they wanted to go. And they were starting some of those negotiations before that. So this isn't unfamiliar. The only unfamiliar thing is that this becomes public that he's going to be canceling all this at this point, given he's met with the number one, number two teams in the draft in Carolina and Houston, and then also Las Vegas. And outside of that, no one else yet. But it makes a lot of sense.
Would guess it was either Joe Thomas or Adrian Peterson who got that. That seems like a very Raiders thing to do, to lob out a boilerplate contract to like you, Jam, Calvin Johnson, and one of the, and like AP or Joe Thomas. Like, who wants? Does anybody want to take this low hanging fruit, like really crappy contract?
Yeah, I mean that was it. They would get him at a discount. Also, two guys getting $20 million.
Al Davis of him. It
was. I can't remember who the fourth person was. Maybe it was Joe T. Or potentially, I'm trying to think. Gaines Adams was in that draft.
Gaines Adams, Levi Brown, LaRon Landry.
Yeah,
Patrick Willis, beast mode. God, I love this draft. Revis.
I know. We had some stuff.
Lawrence Tammons.
But yeah, anyway, the whole point is like, that's pretty typical. There started to be those discussions. That was obviously leading up to the draft, like the week of. This is a bit premature, but it just goes to show you they've made their mind up. That's who they're going to take. And obviously they want to hit the ground running with him, and rightfully so. That's the best way to do it.
Do you know the people that were drafted immediately before and immediately after you? Like, this is just like I'm curious, like if you know the trivia of it.
Immediately after me would have been Dwayne Bowe.
Yep. Ding, ding, ding.
Because
Did you complete passes to him at some point?
Yeah. When I was there, he ended up getting hurt because we used him as backside cutoff on an outside zone play, which is something you probably shouldn't do with your number one receiver.
Who's the coach then?
I'm not going to name names. You can probably figure that out. But anyway, we were actually in Cleveland where that happened. I remember very early in the game, which that whole game plan throwing the football wise was like based around Dwayne. And once he got knocked out, I was like, okay, now we're in some trouble here because we don't really have much depth there to be able to, put someone in that role and really do much. But anyway, Dwayne was after me. I can't remember who was before me at 21.
The answer.
Who is it?
Reggie Nelson, safety out of Florida. Drafted by the Jaguars. Yeah. I was going to ask you too, because I mentioned this yesterday with the Bryce Young stuff. And you played for several NFL teams in your career. Do you think that, signed on as a free agent, do you think that Bryce Young may be doing himself a little disservice by not being able to get to know GMs, other organizations, et cetera? And you never want to think, it might not work out, but if it doesn't work out with him in Carolina, ostensibly, or Houston, is it a thing where, you would have liked to go and meet with Seattle and, you get time with Pete, whatever the case may be. I mean, does that hold weight at all?
I don't think so. They're gonna evaluate the film. That's going to be the biggest thing that you take away from all this. And, they're going to make their decision and their grades largely based off that. I think they've got some idea based on the testing and other things they have access to get a thought and at least have a baseline. And from all accounts, I mean, everyone loves this guy, and that's been my impression of him. So I personally don't think it's going to impact him down the road. I mean, ideally, he's in Carolina for the next decade plus, right, as their franchise quarterback. So I don't think he's thinking that way, and I don't think other teams, if he hits the market, obviously you're going back and reevaluating things, but obviously maybe durability is a concern then, because I can't see him going to the NFL and his game not transitioning well based on how he's played so far in college.
Yeah, and if he becomes a free agent, it means like something has happened that's didn't work out well with Carolina, and so it's not like you're going to be like clamoring over everybody to try to go get him necessarily.
Exactly.
Well, CJ Stroud also dropped in the odds boards. He was the favorite to be the number 1 overall. Now Bryce Young minus 1,200, CJ Stroud plus 650. What do you make of this?
Well, I would just say that Bryce Young yesterday was minus 1,000, now minus 1,200, was minus 300 on Sunday. It's almost entirely based on, again, I say this every day that we talk about draft odds. These are reactionary markets. They are listening to what rumors are, what speculation is, and then people betting into that rumors and speculation and adjusting the odds accordingly. And on Monday, you had a bunch of different nuggets, whether it's in Peter King's column, Albert Breer's column. Those are two that generally get aggregated the most and get spun out into the gambling Twitter sphere. And as we're talking about how Bryce Young is sort of the guy, Bryce Young cancels the visits. They're trying to build a price that people won't bet into Bryce Young at first overall because the exposure is there. And at minus 1,200, you're getting pretty close to it because you have to put down $1,200 to win 100. To me, we've passed the point of that's a good investment because we are still well over a week away and a lot can change in that time. So you'd rather bet minus 2,000 on the day of the draft, knowing with 100% certainty it's going to be Bryce Young, than minus 1,200 10 days before the draft, when you could put down $1,200 and all of a sudden we get that tweet where it's like Will Levis is the object of the Panthers' affection, and all of a sudden you're really peeing your pants.
Yeah, I agreed on that. I think that the question that Katie's trying to go after right now is CJ Stroud, and not necessarily where he goes the first overall pick, but some concern or thought that he might drop in the draft. If Houston passes on him at number 2 or no one trades up with Houston to take them, where does he end up going? And the interesting thing about that is I think there's a few things you could point to as some concerns that teams have. The first is, his accuracy and obviously his level of play adjusted when he was under pressure. It wasn't the same numbers, same output that we saw. You'd expect that, but he had a much more dramatic drop-off through the course of his career when he was under pressure, under duress, as compared to when he was playing from a clean pocket. And so you might want to try to draw some conclusions from that. However, that being said, he saved his best game for last, played great under pressure versus Georgia. And so you're probably contemplating, is it the body of work or is his ability and what he will be what we saw versus Georgia? The other thing is everyone always talks about it, the talent he's throwing to, the system that he's in. A lot of quarterbacks have put up stats and good numbers in Ryan Day's system. Great offensive line that's going to have one tackle, maybe both drafted in the first round, 3 of his offensive linemen drafted. So there's a lot of thought that he played with a lot of talent, and maybe that played a role in it as well. And then there's some other stuff about interviews and maybe, for example, the Manning Passing Academy. I'd been told that, he committed to it the night before, just kind of ghosted him, didn't show up. That's football royalty. And when you do that, that's going to kind of set off some alarms for people of hey, man, that's not how you conduct yourself, especially around the Manning family or just in general if you're going to be a franchise quarterback. So, look, I still view him as the second quarterback that should be taken in this draft class. He's the most accurate quarterback in this draft class. He showcased the athleticism and ability. Anytime I've been around the kid, he's been an upstanding young man who's grown and matured into the leader that I think NFL teams are looking for. So, some of that stuff. And as far as the system he plays in, all the talent he plays around, he can't help that. He just can deliver the ball like he has and put up the numbers that he did. So I think he'll be the number 2 quarterback taken, but there is some talk right now, and maybe it's smoke screens, who knows, that maybe some of the other teams are saying, well, wait a second, if Richardson has a higher ceiling, maybe he makes more sense for us to take if we can't have a guy like Bryce Young that we feel more confident about in his processing and decision-making.
Yeah. What advice or words of wisdom would you give for young quarterbacks who are getting drafted? Because you kind of touched on it a little bit right there with refusing to meet with the Mannings and that kind of stuff. What would you say to these guys who are about to get drafted?
The big thing is don't concern yourself with where you get drafted. There's so many things that are out of your control. So the key is really to just understand it's a starting point. That's all it is. and focus on trying to be as best as you can, learning the system as soon as possible, and going from there. Obviously not all organizations are run the same or built the same. Some quarterbacks can get drafted into better circumstances and teams that are willing to work with their skill set and give them the time and patience to become what they're capable of becoming. I always use that Buffalo Bills and the way they were patient with Josh Allen to really see what he was capable of. I remember people talking about his inaccuracies coming out of Wyoming. They knew the raw ability, the big arm, bigger kid, great athlete. But, the first couple of years in the league, all you heard was, oh, he's inaccurate. He's inaccurate. And I don't remember getting a chance to call some of those games for Fox. And I was watching the tape going, dude, he's not inaccurate. These balls are bouncing off guys' hands, shoulders. He's got so much zip on them. And at the time, there wasn't much separation from some of the receivers. He was still kind of becoming more comfortable with the system. And then in year 3, they get him Stephon Diggs. It's his 3rd year, which is really when you see what a quarterback's capable of. Year 1, you're learning your offense. You're learning all your stuff. Year 2, you're really solidified there, learning what the defense can do. Year 3, you put it all together, you go out there and play. And you see what you're really capable of. And that's what we saw from Josh Allen. He took that meteoric jump to now we view him as one of the best quarterbacks in the league. The problem is not many organizations are going to give you the same offensive coordinator for 3 years, stability and build and go after a Stephon Diggs as one of the best receivers in the league. Not many organizations are going to do that. And so that's the problem is a Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, guys that need time to develop. Will they have time to? Will the organization do everything they can to put them in a position to succeed? Those are all the questions. And those are honestly paramount to anything else. The ability, all these guys have NFL ability. Every one of these players out there, more often than not, an organization F's it up. And that's just the truth. It's no different than being a part of a bad company or a bad organization. The difference is, you don't have control, over a lot once you're under contract. You really have to create a stir or a fuss in order to be able to get out once you realize it's a bad situation. And a lot of other jobs, you go job hunting. You're just like, yeah, putting in my resignation, I'm out of here. I'm going elsewhere to a better opportunity with a better organizational structure, or better ownership.